Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me for today's CoolCare Masterclass, where today we're going to be looking at our timesheets and snap to shift. As I'm sure you're all aware, CoolCare is here to help make your operating your care home easier, more efficient, and more profitable. Today, focusing on the easier and efficiency side of things, looking at our timesheets and our shift snapping. So, during today's masterclass, if anyone does have any questions, you should be able to use the Q&A option on Zoom. You should find it on your window and be able to ask any questions in there. And a member of our team is on hand to answer any questions as we go through. And we'll have some time at the end once we've done the masterclass for any additional questions people might have. You can stick around at the end and ask any other questions that you've got, but do feel free to ask as we're going through as well. So what we'll do today is exploring our shift snapping in CoolCare, how that works on our timesheets in the system, how you can set up CoolCare to recognize what shifts your staff would work on there to then ensure that your timesheet is accurate, reflecting what they've actually done. So we'll be seeing how the shift snapping works, how to create the different things that it needs in order for it to work, and the different settings that's going to affect it, and then how that all appears on your timesheets, and how to adjust those further if we need to as well. So, I'm going to swap over to my demo system, and we will get things underway. Right, spare me 1 moment. I swap over and share my screen. You should see CoolCare there. So, with shift snapping in CoolCare, the main thing as it affects, as you might guess, is our timesheet. So we'll start here just to show you it. For those who are unaware, the timesheet is where all your staff hours go on the system. When a staff member clocks in and out using your clocking machine on there, their hours will go onto here. And the shift snapping will essentially be looking at the shifts that when the staff members have clocked in and out, comparing those to when they're expected to clock in and out, which we'll look at how to set that up. And then seeing if they've done the right shift expected of them, depending on the times and the leeway you set up for them. And those shifts will then be color-coded accordingly on here. So anything blue on the timesheet is where it has snapped a shift successfully, where someone's clocked in and out correctly, done the shift we expected, and that's all good. Where they are orange on a timesheet, that's where they've not snapped a shift, where something is out of the ordinary there, there's an exception that may need looking into on the timesheet here. But as I say, there's a couple of things that you'll need to set up in order for CoolCare to recognize what shifts your staff would do and what leeway they have for clocking in and out, which we can find under our care home section. So there's 2 main parts of this under the home, both found under the home setup. If I go to there. The first part that's going to affect our shift snapping is the staff positions tab on this page. If I go in there, you'll get a list of all your positions for your home. And if I click into any one of these, each position will have its own list here of shift definitions. So these shift definitions are essentially what the shift snapping is looking to try and snap the shifts to. They're the shift times you expect your staff to work to say this is what CoolCare should be looking for when it sends shift snapping on there. So, and each position can have its own set of shift definitions to say, what they would normally snap to and, what you expect your staff to work on there. So in this example here, these are my shift definitions for the care assistants in my home. I've got a long day shift set up to be 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. A morning shift to be the first half of that, and an afternoon from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. as well. And these can be customized on CoolCare. Yours will be have your own in there, but you can add to these lists whenever you need to. And you can check them all from the drop down in there. So for example, for a night shift in mine, I've just got the night staff in there, which has just the single night shift in there, nothing else more complex. We can be as complex or simple as you need to be with them. And if you need to add any shift definitions onto the system, you can do it through this page, just choosing the position you want, clicking the insert button at the top of the list, and then filling out the details. So for example, for my seniors here, they've got a long day and a morning shift. We don't have the afternoon in there, so I can add that in on this page. Just call the shift whatever you like, in this case, afternoon. Specify when it would start and end. So I'll go from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m., for example. And then the period, kind of part of the day that falls under. The period isn't so important for the shift snapping. That's more used by your rota, because the shift definitions are also used by the rotas in CoolCare to say what shifts you would be setting up for them on that rota. So it kind of pulls double duty in that sense. Also, you can say if the shift would deduct breaks from it or not. But with the shift times added in there, if I save that, that is then added on my shift definitions for a senior carer, which means if one of my seniors clocks in 1 p.m., clocks out 7 p.m., you'll be able to recognize that on here as afternoon shift and give him the hours for that shift. and I say deduct any breaks if I want them to as well. So that's the first part that's required for your shift snapping to work is the shift definitions set up for each staff position. Make sure they're in there. Say if you're using the rotors on CoolCare, you'll probably have some shift definitions set up already. But if not, let's say you can set these up for your shift snapping in that. And so if you have any new shift times, you can add them in there at any time. If any are no longer in use, they can also be deleted from there if you don't want them to snap to that shift. That's, yeah, this is just saying what we expect our staff to do. Then the other part of the shift snapping that's going to affect how it all works can be found in the settings tab on this page. Again, still in the home setup, just a different tab on here. Specifically, this box on the right-hand side, all these options for the rotor timesheet configuration. Now, one thing I'd just like to clear up at this point is, obviously, it's called rotor timesheet configuration, but actually the shift snapping in here doesn't require a rotor in CoolCare. Because it's just using the shift definitions and the time and the leeway in this page, you don't need a rotor in CoolCare in order to use the shift snapping, because it's all based on the shift times you've set up. And I think these settings here are kind of giving you the leeway for clocking in and out to say they don't have to be dead on time. They can be a little, clocking a little bit before the shift begins, after it ends, and what leeway you want to set up if they can be, clocking in late, etc. That kind of stuff as well. So I'm going to pull up my timesheets alongside this so we can kind of show you both of them and explain how each setting might affect stuff. So we'll start with the simple ones, which is this one here before shift starts, and this one here after shift ends. That's essentially your leeway either side of a shift to say how early someone can clock in before the shift begins, how late they can clock out after it ends, and still snap them to shift. So in my case, that's set to 30 minutes, half an hour each side. So how that works is if I use my timesheet on here and have a look at one of these, we can see it's in action. So as we've seen already, a regular shift time for my senior carers in my home is to be 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. And we can see here when this person's clocked in and out. So they clocked in 7:15 just before the shift begins, so 15 minutes. That's within the half an hour limit I've set up. And there they've clocked out 7:10. So again, within the half an hour limit that they've got set up. So CoolCare does recognize that they've been here for almost 12 and a half hours. But because it's snapping it to shift, it's not giving them the extra 15 minutes beforehand, not giving the extra 10 minutes afterwards. It's just giving the hours for the 7x7 shift that they would have been expected to do. As well as that, it's also set up to deduct. I've got my system set up to deduct a 1 hour break when a staff member does a 12-hour shift for a senior. So that's how they're left with 11 standard hours at the top, snapping them to the 12 hours and then taking off another hour for that break that's set up in the system. And that's kind of how the before shift starts, after shift ends work, just looking at if they're kind of clocking in early, clocking out after the shift ends. But what if someone clocks in late? So that's where you've got this bit, the after shift starts. So clocking in late, clocking out early works slightly differently on here, because rather than saying whether it'll snap to a shift, it's more focused on if it would need to deduct any time for them if they are clocking in late or clocking out early. So, for example, the after shift starts here is set to 5 minutes in my home. That means if someone clocks in up to 5 minutes late, it's not going to deduct any time, and it's still going to count them as starting at at their start time of 7 a.m. in my case, which we can see again on my timesheet here. I have one of these set up for that. Here we go. So this is one of my night stuff set up to work from 7 p.m. till 7 a.m. And here you can see the clocked in at 2 minutes past 7. Because that's within the 5 minutes after shift start limits, it's still, counting them as starting from 7 a.m., which is why they've still got the 12 hours there, even if they did clock in a little bit late. So you can give them a little bit of leeway for clocking in late if you'd want. If it was after that 5-minute shift start, if it was over that at all, for like 10 minutes late, then that's where this next bit kicks in underneath, the arrive late dock interval. If someone does clock in late, essentially how it's going to deal with their time. In my case, that's set to use the exact clock time, which means, say, if someone clocks in at 7:10, 10 minutes after their shift begins, because they're past that 5 minutes, it will only start paying them the hours from the minute they clocked in that case, the 10 past on there. But you can set up to kind of round it to the nearest set of minutes. So I could say, round it to the nearest 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour on there if I really wanted to. But I usually stick to the exact clock time on mine to say the minute they clock in, that's the minute they get paid from, essentially, on there. The other side of that is this one here, before shift ends, which is exactly the same thing. If someone clocks out early at all, is it going to give them a bit of leeway there? So mine's set to 0, which means if someone does clock out early at all, even a minute before 7, it will only pay them up to the minute they clock out. So I've got an example of that on here. Just bear with me 1 moment. So there's my good example on that one. This person clocked in, before the shift began, so that's fine. We can see here they clocked out half an hour early. So because of that, they were present for 11.5 hours, and essentially that's what they got on the top there, 11.5 hours. Good to mention at this point that anything that doesn't snap to shift, if they are clocking in late, clocking out early, also won't have any break deductions applied. They will be the raw hours, and they won't have any breaks set up for them, which is why somehow someone that's not snapped to shift has more hours than someone that hasn't, because they've not got that 1 hour break deducted from their shift there. Let's say essentially it's taken off half an hour because that's how early they clocked out on there. And again, the leave early dock interval is the same as the arrive late. If they leave early at all, when is it going to pay them up to, essentially, in there? So yeah, they work slightly different, as I say, to the before shift starts and after shift ends. The other last bit that's going to affect that is this one here, the snap to shift limit time. So this is specifically looking at anything that is not snap to shift. Oh, sorry, if they're clocking in late or clocking out early, what kind of leeway they can have to still show as snapped to shift. So for example, again, that night shift I showed you, where you clocked in late, clocked in at 2 minutes past 7. So because that's within the 10-minute limit set up here, it knows it's late, or even if it is still within that limit, but it's still going to highlight it as blue to say it's snapped to shift because it's within 10 minutes there. So this one only controls the core coding, whereas the after shift start before shift ends is just to say if they would have time deducted from their shift in the first place. So someone can be, if someone was like, say, 7 minutes late on mine, they'd still be after the shift starts, so they're going to get paid from 7 minutes past. But because of within the snap to shift limit time there, it would show a snap to shift on the timesheet with that on there. So yeah, they can have the kind of two interact with each other on there. Yes. So the after shift start before shift ends just controls whether the person will get paid for clocking in late or clocking out early. The snap to shift limit time controls if they do clock in late or clock out early, if it still snaps them to shift or not. So you can think of that one like the before shift start and after shift ends, essentially. And then the hour rounding interval, for anything not snapped to shift, you can have it round to, again, either using the exact minutes or rounding it to the nearest set of minutes in there with that. So anything that's not snapped to shift on my timesheet will be rounded to the nearest 15 minutes in my case on there, rather than using the exact times. Which is why we can see, 11.5 hours, 11.5, or 12.75, 12.5 hours, etc. 12 and 3/4, excuse me, etc. in there. But yes, those are the settings that control your shift snapping in there. The important ones are say the after shift start before shift ends to say the leeway for clocking in and out either side. Before shift starts, after shift ends there. The after shift start before shift ends is if they can clock in late to clock out early. And then if they do clock in late or clock out early, the snap to shift limit time controls if it will still snap them to shift or not. And arguably the most important setting on this page that you want to make sure is ticked for your shift snapping to work is the option there, snap to preset shift times. If that's not enabled, the shift snapping won't even look for anything or work. So make sure you have that enabled to have your shift snapping take effect. And the good thing with these options on here is you can play around with these, and it's not going to kind of affect anything that's already been set on the timesheets. Essentially, if I were to play around with these today and move my limits around, it would only affect the shifts when people clock out today. It's only affect today's shifts and anything onwards from there. So that way you can kind of play around with your settings on there, understand what they all do, how they all work, and get it set up perfectly for your home by kind of almost narrowing it down day by day if you want to on there. So yeah, that's the idea with the shift snapping settings there. As I say, remember, first bit, the shift definitions to say what shifts they should be snapping to, and then the settings themselves to say what leeway they've got for clocking in and out around those times that you've set. So that is the idea with shift snapping there. Again, just to reiterate, you don't have to use the rotor in order for shift snapping to work. And the rotor itself doesn't affect, the shift snapping. So if someone's rotated in to do, say, a full day shift of 7 × 7, but if they only clock in and out and do half a day, it's still going to snap the shift because that half day shift is one set up in your shift definitions, regardless of what the rotor is actually set up to say what they should be doing. So that's another thing to be aware of. Is even if something does snap to shift, it might not still match whatever is on the rotor if they've only done half a day when they're expected to do a full day, or vice versa. They might do a full day when they were rotated to do half a day, etc. in there. But as for the timesheet itself, as I say, when someone snaps to shift, it will turn blue on here, and when it's not snapped to shift, it will be orange. But with those that aren't snapped to shift, we might need to make adjustments and amendments to them, because obviously, what's there might not be what we're actually going to pay them for the shift they've worked. So we'll start with this one where they've clocked out early. So before they clocked in, 5 to 7 just before the shift begins, clocked out 7:30 with that. So they were present for 11.5 hours, but because it's not snapped to shift, it's not deducted the 1 hour break that would normally be on a 12-hour shift. In this case, because they've not actually worked the full 12 hours, we would only actually deduct half an hour from that, in my case here. So I'm actually just going to get rid of the 0.5 and just say they worked 11 hours, which is essentially what they did with the half-hour break they would have had in that shift. If they did take an hour break, I can set that down to 10.5 if I want to as well. Essentially just adjusting the hours as you need to. I'm going to say it was 11 hours. They took half-hour break and left half an hour early. When you do add something onto a shift, if you update the hours on there, it's always good to add on a note to say what's been done, why we've changed that shift, so we know who's been doing what on the system and making changes. So in this case, let's say they clocked out early, and we're going to deduct, and we've said that we've deducted on that. And I'm going to pop my initials on so we know who's made that change as well. And once I save that, we'll turn pink. So when you edit a shift on the timesheet, updating the hours or anything like that, it turns pink to say it's been manually changed. So it will go from orange to pink in this case here. And that'll be on all of them. So if I check this other one here, let's have a look. This one is where they've clocked in earlier. They've clocked in 45 minutes before the shift begins. So that's where they may have come in early to help out, done a bit of extra overtime, something like that. Again, with it's not snapping to shift, it's not deducted any break there. So that's how they've got the 12.75. So we're first going to reduce that down to take off the 1 hour break in there. And then I'm going to add on the extra hours as an extra, well, it'd be 0.75 that they've done because they clocked in early and we're helping out from that time. So in case they've basically got 11 standard, the regular shift, and the extra 45 minutes as extra hours, which can be paid differently on the payroll side of things. So if I save that, once again, it turns pink and now has a little EVE on it there to say that it has extra hours on that one specifically. We have a quick question come through regarding breaks. Let's say, so CoolCare, just to explain it again, CoolCare can deduct breaks automatically, but it would only do its on ones that are snapped to shift. I didn't show it on there, but if you need to set up break deductions, they're found in that same home setup. And there's two ways you can do it, either on the break deductions tab here, which is where you set up, if everyone in the home has the same breaks, they can be set up in there. Essentially saying after working so many hours, it will deduct so much time. And they kind of stack on top of each other. So after working 4 hours, it deducts 15 minutes. Working 6 hours, it deducts another 15 minutes for half an hour. Working 12 hours, it deducts another half an hour. So for a full 1 hour break for a 12-hour shift. Again, that can be done there if it's the same for everyone, or it can be done at the staff positions level as well. If you go into a position, there is its own tab for break deductions there. But yes, as I say, they'll only deduct the breaks if they snap to shift. Otherwise, it will be one that's not snapped and not have any time deducted from it for a break. So hopefully that clears up that for unsure. The last one I've got here that I need to adjust is this one here, the 13 hours. Again, if you look at it, in this case, this is kind of the other side of it where they've stayed late, do an extra hour. As you can see there, they've clocked out at 8 p.m. Again, because it's not snapped to shift, it's got the full 13 hours there. So like I did with the other one, I'm going to just take off it down to 11 hours for their regular 12 hours minus the 1 hour break. And I'm going to pop in 1 extra hour in there so we know that they've done an additional hour on top of their regular standard. And if I save that, again, it'll turn it pink, 12 with the E for extra hours in there. So yeah, anything that's not snapped to shift, as I say, you will have to then adjust them to make up for the break deductions and ensure the hours accurately reflect what the staff members actually worked to ensure it's been done correctly. Again, when you do have them, good to pop in a note so we know what's been done and who's done what's on the timesheet there. On that. As well as that, there is an additional step you can take on a timesheet, essentially to confirm that those shifts are all correct. Once a shift has been edited, or even if it's just snapped as shift, there's an extra little tick box on there that only certain people may have access to, depending on how your system's been set up, to authorize a shift. If I tick that box there and save it, it will just turn that shift green. So green just means it's been authorized, and this is completely optional. You don't have to authorize the shifts for it to go to payroll or anything like that. It's there just to say someone's double checked, confirm that's definitely correct, and we know it's all good. So it's more for your own peace of mind than anything else. You can authorize shifts to say, yep, that's definitely correct and is fine on there. Typically, I recommend doing that after a shift has been changed. One person might go in and make the changes, another person goes in afterwards, double checks those changes, and will authorize them as well. So yeah, just as an extra step, for your own records or anything like that, you can authorize them if you wish. Finally, just to mention on here, I've still got some orange shifts, as you can see on mine, that have not snapped, but these are for slightly different reasons. Firstly, these ones for yesterday all have a little letter next to them, and that's because they've come from my calendar. So on the calendar in CoolCare, where you add in training, absences, or holidays, they don't snap to shift and timesheet here because typically people won't be clocking in and out for that. So if you see anything that's orange that has a little letter next to it, you'll know that's why it's something that's come from the calendar, and typically you can leave those as is. And then the ones for today that are orange would say 0 are where the staff members clocked in, but they haven't clocked out yet. They haven't finished their shift, so it can't snap it to shift right away on there. Once they clock out, that's when the shift snapping takes effect to check the times, see if it can stand into shift, and it will code them accordingly. So if you see anything that's orange on timesheet that says 0, it's likely where someone may have forgotten to clock out at the end of their shift, where you can add in manual clocks for them if you remember from the staff records. Yeah, for those for today, I'm not worried about them because they're not clocked out yet, so they're all fine. And that is our timesheet and shift snapping in a nutshell there. Hopefully that has cleared some things up for everybody on there. Just before we wrap up though, a couple of things to mention. Go back to my presentation. If you do need additional help with CoolCare, with the shift snapping or anything else you might need, well, firstly, you can get in touch with us at training if you wanted additional training sessions to go over any part of CoolCare, the timesheets, to getting the setup of that all correct, anything like that could be done through there. You can email us training@coolcare.co.uk, or you can phone our team and we can get something organized for you. So you may have some training available free of charge as part of your CoolCare subscription. You can also get in touch with our support team if you've got any small questions or need any help with the system. And that's, you can call them up on the phone number on screen there. You can email them, support@coolcare.co.uk, or you can use the live chat within CoolCare itself, the little blue bubble in the bottom left corner of the system. To click on that and you can fill your details and have a chat with support from there as well. So any other queries regarding your account and subscriptions to CoolCare, you can email our customer success team as well for anything regarding that. But anything you need, our teams are available to help you out with whatever it may be on your system. And all that's left to say now is thank you for joining me for today's Masterclass. Next one in 2 weeks' time is looking at integrations, so seeing how CoolCare integrates with external systems, seeing that all in action on there. So, thank you all for joining me today. If you want to ask any further questions, we'll stick around for 5 minutes. We can answer any of the questions you've got on there. Otherwise, I hope to see you next time for our next Masterclass. Thank you all for joining and have a nice day.